Syndicate blood never washes out easily. I scrubbed the porous concrete until my knuckles throbbed inside my cheap rubber gloves. Down here in the sub-basement, the damp gets into your bones. The blood pooling near the drain was thick and sticky, fighting the bleach. It caught the flickering light with a metallic silver sheen. Old bloodlines. Someone important died against this wall. I didn't care. Survival meant keeping my head down and my mouth shut. I was an Omega. A ghost in the architecture. The concrete ceiling vibrated above me. Muffled cheers bled through the floorboards in a rhythmic boom. Vance. 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 The Iron Alpha was cementing his rule tonight. A political mating ritual to Alara of the Neon Fangs. The kind of high-level violence that keeps the city running. I poured another capful of bleach and watched the silver suds wash down the grate. Done. Then the floor above went dead. No gradual fade. The stomping just stopped. In a syndicate stronghold, quiet means someone is about to bleed. I left the bucket and crept toward the maintenance alcove, stopping under the grated service elevator shaft. 40 feet above, industrial floodlights bleached the main floor. Vance stood in a tailored black suit. Alara gripped his forearm. The silver chalice lay overturned on the marble. But the crowd of hundreds was paralyzed. I squinted through the glare. The light hit Vance's shoulders and boots, but the floor behind him was empty. No shadow. The blood magic had flatly rejected the political lie. Alara started screaming at the technicians. The massive floodlight rigs shrieked as they swung erratically, sweeping the room to find an angle that would force the Alpha's shadow into existence. One of the beams tipped down. The light punched through the elevator grating, pinning me like a bug under a microscope. The shouting upstairs stopped. I lowered my arms, blinking through the burn. The light connected the stage to the basement, and stretched tight across the inside of the shaft was a pitch-black silhouette. It started at the glass stage and ended perfectly at the tips of my wet boots. Vance's shadow was tethered to me. Alara let out a feral shriek. Weapons cleared their holsters. Up on the stage, Vance walked to the edge. He didn't look at his furious bride or his soldiers. He looked down the shaft at me. Then he simply stepped off. Concrete cracked as he hit the floor 40 feet below. Dust washed over me. He stood up slowly, the 80-foot shadow reeling in until he eclipsed the light. "You," his voice vibrated in my chest. "Get up." The grating above us exploded. Silver bullets chewed through the masonry, raining debris. Before I could flinch, Vance grabbed my waist, hauled me over his shoulder and ran. My ribs slammed into his shoulder as he navigated the utility maze blindly. He smelled like ozone and crushed pine. We tore through the sub-basement, heavy boots pounding the stairs behind us. Alara's guard. Vance kicked a fire door off its hinges and sprinted down a pipe-lined corridor. He skidded to a stop. A windowless brick wall. A dead end. Vance dropped me to the grating. He turned his back to the wall, claws sliding from his knuckles. He was going to stand there and let them shoot him just to take a few with him. "Alpha." My voice cracked. I turned to the wall. Third row from the bottom, 5 bricks over. I jammed my fingers into the loose mortar and pulled. A heavy click echoed. I shoved the brick and a 6-foot section of the wall ground inward on hidden hinges. Vance stared at me for half a second, then grabbed my elbow. We threw ourselves into the dark just as gunfire shredded the brickwork. He kicked the pivot plate, sealing the wall and cutting off the noise. We hit a rusted chute and slid blindly into the freezing catacombs, spilling out onto a concrete floor. I pressed my back against the curved wall, trying to catch my breath. Vance stood up and started walking into the pitch black. "Wait," I whispered. He ignored me. At 10 feet, the air grew heavy. At 15, a static charge prickled my skin. At 20, a white-hot hook sank into my sternum and yanked backward. I collapsed, gasping. Up ahead, Vance hit the floor with a ragged groan. "Rue." The tether wasn't just magic. It was a physical chain. I dragged myself forward on my elbows. When my hand brushed his torn jacket, he clamped his fingers over my wrist. The pain vanished instantly. We lay there in the dark, breathing in sync. Then a wet snuffling drifted down through the grate above us. "Hounds." Vance pushed himself up. "Stay behind me," he ordered. He stepped onto the old subway tracks. Clang. His heavy boots bounced off the tiled walls like a gunshot. The hounds barked louder. I scrambled up and shoved my hands against his chest. He froze, a low rumble vibrating in his throat. No one touched him like this. You walk like you want them to find you, I hissed, keeping my hands on him. Bend your knees. Roll your weight inward. Don't let your heels hit. He let out a harsh breath, lowered his hips and took a softer step. Before we could move, a synthetic white light slashed across the tunnel. Drone patrol. I dragged him toward a shallow trackworker's alcove. There were no doors. Just a 2-foot indentation in the brick. The drone's hum grew louder. Its spotlight would catch us easily. I pressed against the wall, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the alarm. Vance shifted. He turned his back to the open tunnel, grabbed my shoulders and pulled me flat against his chest. He opened his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around me, caging me in the dark. The light swept past. I felt the heat of it hit the back of his coat, but inside I just smelled pine and listened to his pulse. He used his own body as a shield for my panic. The drone moved on. We crouched behind an outfall pipe, looking at an iron bridge. 4 mercenaries guarded it under bright floodlights. Vance popped his claws. 3 seconds to clear the gap. No, I whispered. I checked my scarred watch. Shift change is at 3 a.m. Watch the guy on the right. He wants a cigarette. At 2:58 the metal door opened. The relief squad stepped out. For 10 seconds, all 8 men turned away to swap flasks and complain. Yow. We glided across the bridge. We hit the far side and melted into the crevice just as the guards turned back. Vance looked down at me in the dark, his eyes heavy with realization. He nodded once. Lead the way, Rue. I stepped deeper into the catacombs, my boot catching a thin wire. A mechanical siren shrieked. Red strobes painted the tunnel. Rifle fire chipped the stone next to my ear. We ran. A high-caliber round hit a rotting support beam above us. The wood cracked. Vance shoved me hard between the shoulder blades. I hit the wet stone right as the ceiling gave way. Tons of brick and dirt crashed down, blocking the tunnel. Alpha. I coughed. Silence. I took a step backward. The air was sucked from my lungs. The invisible hook drove through my sternum again. I dropped to my knees, clawing my chest. He was moving away on the other side, pulling the chain. Smash. Dust erupted from the rubble. He was tearing through it. A chunk of concrete exploded outward, and Vance pulled himself through the gap, his hands torn and bleeding. The pressure in my chest vanished. He hauled me up. I've got you, he rasped. We hid in an abandoned pump room. I cracked a green glow stick and used a strip of my shirt to bandage his split knuckles. You didn't hesitate on the bridge, Vance said quietly. But when that spotlight hit you in the elevator shaft, you looked like you were waiting for the executioner. I tied off the bandage. Attention is a death sentence down here. Being invisible is my only armor. He lifted his unbandaged hand and touched my jaw. You aren't invisible anymore, Rue. The rusted PA speaker sparked to life. Alara's voice dripped through the static. You just walked directly into the drain. A mechanical thump shook the floorboards. Black, freezing water began rushing under the blast door. The water hit my chest, paralyzing my muscles. Vance waded to the buckled steel door, wedged his fingers into the gap and ripped it off the frame. The aqueduct current caught us. Vance hoisted me out of the water, cradling me against his chest. He was burning his own core heat to keep me from freezing as he trudged through the flood. We reached the outer ring of the hydroplant. Thin red beams swept the dark chamber. Laser sights. They're on the north gantry, I whispered in his ear. They sweep every 10 seconds. Step where I tell you. He followed my directions blindly, weaving us through the dormant, flooded turbines. We stayed in the blind spots, moving like ghosts. We reached the final double doors. Above us, a single drop of condensation fell from a pipe. Plip. It rippled the water. A sniper's laser snapped to the distortion, then straight to Vance's chest. Down. I screamed. Vance threw his shoulder through the double doors just as the rifles fired. We hit the central generator floor, sliding in knee-deep water. A dozen halogen spotlights snapped on. Alara stood on the control deck above us, flanked by 20 guards. We were trapped in the open. Alara smiled. She pointed her pistol straight up at the main halogen cluster and fired. The glass shattered. The room plunged into pitch black. Muzzle flashes tore the dark apart. Vance stepped away from me to engage the guards dropping from the catwalks. but the tether in my chest felt hollow. Without light he cast no shadow. Without the shadow he was just an exhausted man in freezing water. A rifle stock caught him in the shoulder. He staggered. A flashlight beam locked onto his back. Target acquired. A sniper's laser swept toward me. Vance threw himself right into the path of the beam as the rifle cracked. He dropped to one knee, gripping a turbine casing. The water around my boots grew warm. I dropped to my knees, feeling his torn coat in the dark. Silver blood coated his side. He weakly wrapped his fingers around my wrist, just checking to see if I was alive. Up above, guards were moving to the breaker panel. Over the control deck hung an auxiliary neon spotlight. Next to it was an iron throw lever. To pull it, I'd have to leave the dark and stand completely exposed. I pulled my hand from Vance's grip. "I'm right here," I whispered. I stood up. I splashed through the water. I didn't try to hide. "Movement," a guard yelled. Bullets chewed the water as I hit the iron stairs. Shrapnel bit my cheek. I reached the platform, bathed in the intersecting beams of enemy flashlights. Alara screamed at them to shoot me. I ignored her. I grabbed the cold iron lever, closed my eyes and threw my weight back. The lever slammed into the slot. The neon fixture exploded, hitting the deck with a blinding white glare. I stood right under it. From the heels of my boots, a dense black shadow erupted. It raced down the stairs and across the water, hitting Vance. The tether snapped taut. Power surged out of my chest and poured into him. Vance stood up. His eyes burned gold. The shadow blanketed him, feeding him kinetic energy from the light. He moved faster than the guards could track. He pulled one over the railing and threw another through a pipe. He dismantled Alara's elite guard in 40 seconds. I stood in the light, feeling the recoil in my chest with every strike. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was holding the light so he could weaponize the dark. Alara backed up against the catwalk railing. Her pistol dropped into the water. She started begging, blaming the council, pleading for a treaty. Vance stood below her. He looked at her with total apathy. He gave her nothing, no anger, no words. He just turned his back. He waded through the water, walking to the bottom of my stairs. And he began to climb. His boots clanged on the metal grating. He stopped at the top, standing exactly 1 inch outside the harsh circle of the spotlight. He was dripping with blood and oil. He didn't grab me. He lowered his chin and slowly extended his torn hand across the boundary of the light. He was asking for permission. I didn't step back. I reached out and put my hand in his. Vance stepped into the light and let his knees buckle. He hit the grating, bowing his head to press his face against my knuckles. Alara sobbed from the catwalk, forced to watch the king she tried to buy surrender to an Omega cleaner. "My life," Vance murmured, his breath hot against my fingers. "My pick. My city. Yours." The tether wasn't a chain anymore. It was an anchor. I squeezed his hand. "Get up. We have a city to take back." The freight elevator hummed as it pulled us up from the basin. I stood at the front of the glass cage, my uniform stained and ruined but my spine straight. Vance stood behind me, a quiet, grounding presence. The elevator hit the main floor. The steel blast doors parted. The chaotic crowd of elites was waiting to see who survived. The doors opened and the city found themselves staring directly at me.